Everywhere you look, on the TV, the internet, the news, you hear about this huge psyop that's being played on us all. Have you heard about it? At this point, you have to be living in a cave on a remote mountaintop to have not heard of this massive psyop being played on us all. There are many names for it, and I won't name them because YouTube doesn't like that. But I'm sure you know what I mean, reset whatever. It's about the end of the civilized world, about a total restructuring, about an ushering in of an evil elite who will do away with most of us and enslave the remaining who have not been purged. And I'm not saying there aren't people out there who would like to do just such a thing. There are. The world is filled with strange birds. And we've all heard about this. If you look at the news and current events, it's hard not to believe it's true. So, what if it really is true, but it's not the psyop you think it is? That is what I want to address here. We're told of a grim dystopian future, the end of all kindness and goodness and light, a world filled with terror and torture, gloom and despair, starvation and darkness. One group will rule in absolute abundance and prosperity. The other group will serve in abject poverty and humiliation. And it's them or they who will do these terrible things to us, although we never know for sure who them or they are. But we might have a good idea who some of them are. And we're told that we are being divided into bitterly opposed groups, which if you look around is absolutely true. But it's also that murky they who are doing the dividing. Some say it's a group of elites in Europe. Others say it's the alphabet agencies right here in the good old USA. Still others say it's an ethnic group trying to delete everyone else. And on the stories of they grow more and more fantastic and terrifying. And it's hard not to believe in the stories at this point. I mean, let's be honest, this is not a perfect world, not by a long shot. There's real crime, real problems, real strife and sorrow. There really are bad and despicable people out there. Although there are very good people too. We tend to forget that. So I'm not trying to pretend that darkness does not exist. It exists all too well. But I wonder if you are like me. You see, I am so very tired of hearing about all the bad things and the terrible things that they are going to do. The psyop that they are going to unleash on us. I am worn down to the nub with all of this. I'm exhausted every time I turn around. There's more and more and more. And usually what happens when I get exhausted is I start getting pissed off. Believe it or not, that can be a good thing because it makes me say, hold it a minute. What is actually going on here? It makes me pause and figure things out. So you can turn off your TV or your radio or shut down the internet and get off social media, but eventually it will all creep right back in again. The terrible thing that they are doing or are going to do. And we're always right on the edge of the end of the world, aren't we? It's an awful feeling and it just wears you down. So here is what I have come up with. It occurred to me quite some time ago. I found myself asking this question. What if the warnings themselves that we continually get about this psyop that's supposedly going to happen soon, what if the warnings themselves are actually the psyop and not some future cataclysm that is just around the corner? What if the real psyop is actually all this talk we're all doing about a supposed psyop? That would mean that we're already in the psyop. It's operational right now. And the psyop isn't about the end of the world and strife and terror and death. It's about us all being afraid of the end of the world and strife and terror and death. Do you know what I mean? It would make sense. Everybody's petrified about what's going to happen, and it's just around the corner and it's going to be awful. Except they don't pay attention to the fact that things are already pretty awful. And mostly because people are worried about things becoming awful at some point in the future. Does this make sense? It's not the awful thing that's going to happen, you see. It's worrying about the awful thing that's going to happen. And that's driving most people crazy right now. I mean, why go through the work and expense of torturing and enslaving the people when the people will do it for you? I'd say a good 50 to 75% of people are already tortured and enslaved in their own minds. It's a lot more economical and convenient for the supposed elite to just let the people torture themselves about what might happen until they're half crazy and enslaved by their own fear and begging for a pre-made solution that they already have waiting in the wings. And again, I'm not saying there aren't bad people out there in the world. There are. But 90% of the power they have is actually granted to them by us through our fear of what might happen, of what they might do. We've turned these wretched little worms into demigods and given them power and status way beyond their true abilities. You're not playing a game. You are the game. You are being played. And what's more, you are being used to create their world instead of a world that you might want for yourself. Your energy is being harnessed and used, make no mistake about it. Quite successfully, I might add. Now, if you've listened to my videos, you know I believe that thoughts create things. Not in some mumbo-jumbo, new agey kind of way, okay? Not with a magic wand. I am a practical woman. My feet are firmly planted on the ground. So let me explain to you how a thought actually becomes reality, how it goes from nothing to something. And this process can be used for good or bad. Let's use the example of the architect. An architect decides he wants to create a beautiful building. He thinks about it, about all aspects of it, fantasizes about it, dreams of it. And right now, it's a thought in his mind and nothing more than a thought. We're told that thoughts are just tiny electrical currents, which I take objection to, by the way, but that is for another story. A tiny electrical current is just a wisp of almost nothing. You cannot measure it. And yet it exists. A thought is something. So here he is with his thought of the beautiful building. He talks to some people about this beautiful building. Now, through speech, through human speech, his thought has become a sound wave. And a sound wave has a little more substance to it than an electrical current, doesn't it? Now, here's a very important part. Once his thought becomes a sound wave, it is transferred into the minds of the people around him by speaking. Now they have his thought in their minds. They can ignore it if they want. They can pay attention to it if they want, but they cannot undo it. It has already been placed. And as an aside, allow me to say this. Do you see just how privileged a species mankind actually is? You are the only creature on this planet who can transfer a thought from your mind to the mind of someone else. No other animal, fish, bird, plant, etc. can do that. Just you. And that makes you very special. And it actually makes you very powerful, too. It even makes you godlike, on a lower level, of course. Most religions, in one way or another, will tell you that you are created in the image of deity, of the divine, of God, however you want to call the all-powerful. The word image is the root of the word imagination. You were imagined by the divine, and now you are real. And you too can imagine things and make them real. Now, before you freak out on me and say, "That's blasphemy," let me explain what I mean. I am not a religious woman, but I am a very spiritual woman. I am not saying that you yourself are God, that you are the be-all, end-all. No, I am not saying that. What I am saying is that you are made in the image of the divine, but you are on a much lower level. The divine creates the universe, you create your surroundings. The divine creates all that ever was, is, and will ever be forever. You create your own limited thoughts throughout your lifetime, if you choose to, that is. You don't have to, of course, although, what a waste if you do not. You have been given such a tremendous gift after all. So, back to our architect. His thought is now in the minds of others, and some of them like his thought very much. He decides to draw the building on paper. Now it has become a solid thing. We went from thought to sound wave to paper, from an electrical current to a sound wave to a piece of paper. And paper is a physical thing. Right now, the building is very small and two-dimensional. It has height and width, but no depth. Time goes on. The architect talks to people who talk to people who talk to more people. Some of those people are very interested, so the architect creates a tabletop model. Now there is a beautiful, albeit tiny, rendition of the building sitting on a table. We went from electrical current, a thought, to sound wave, to paper, to a model. Now it has 3 dimensions, but the architect needs those dimensions to be much bigger, of course. The talking and trading of thought continues. Now we have secured financing and contracted a builder. Supplies are bought and people are hired. And brick by brick, plank by plank, the building begins to solidify. A basement, a foundation, walls, piece by piece until it is done. We went from thought to sound wave to paper to model to building. It is done. And that's just one way a thought becomes reality. Oh, all-powerful human thought. Oh, all-powerful human words. A long time ago, I had a friend named Kristen. We met in college, and we did many things together. We always had a great time. She was a lot of fun. She was also a very strict religious woman. And I was a wild child, and that's putting it mildly. As I said, I am very spiritual. Yes, that I have always been. But I was never religious. One day I asked her if she wanted to see a movie. Instead of just saying yes or no, she put me through the 3rd degree of questioning. Is it a good movie? Is it a bad movie? Is there a lot of sex? Are there drugs? Is there death and destruction? Is it scary or gross? On and on the questions went until I started to regret even asking her. I ended up telling her it really wasn't that bad, because it wasn't. But after giving her more details, she flat out refused. Now this confused me, and I had to know why. Well, what she told me was a bit beyond my complete comprehension at the time, although I have since grasped it quite well. Back then, I thought she was just being a little over the top. She said this: "I have to protect my mind." To which I responded that no one was after her mind. And she said that was not true. She said many things are after our minds and we have to protect our minds. She then went on to say that if you can imagine something bad, something terrible, something just awful, as soon as you do that, you bring it into the realm of possibilities, at least in your own mind, no matter how crazy the thing might be. If you can imagine it, if it gets planted in your brain by you or by someone else, it instantly becomes a possibility. It may materialize someday, but even if it never does, it will always be there in the background, haunting you with the possibility. I was young then. I didn't quite understand, but I do now. I went through many years of bumping my head in the dark, trying to understand what was going on. Like the architect's building, my friend was worried about bad thoughts being planted in her mind and then becoming a reality. Of course, we don't live in a plastic bubble. Bad thoughts are going to filter in now and then. That's just the way the world works. But we don't have to invite them in, do we? We don't have to give them the red carpet treatment, do we? We are capable of holding up our hand and saying, "Stop! Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further." We are capable of being the rock of our own consciousness, of being Peter. We are the rock, should we choose to invoke that aspect of ourselves. And so the psyop of the end of the world, of society crashing down, of mayhem and terror and death and starvation, that terrible end thought planted so widely in the minds of just about everyone at this point, that is not the psyop. The real psyop is you believing that garbage, internalizing it and thinking about it, and like the architect, ultimately creating it, by accident, of course. That's right, the psyop is that you create your own demise, nobody else. This end-of-the-world idea is already on paper and video everywhere, which means it is already in the two-dimensional stage, at least. And it's not being created by them. It's being created by you. That's right. You have been yoked into burden. Your energy has been harnessed. Their thoughts were cleverly placed in your mind. That's true, but you are running with the ball. You are the game, but here's the thing. They desperately need you to fulfill your role. And the more people who do fulfill the role, who unwittingly use their own power to create their own demise, the more powerful the eventual solidified dystopian future becomes. But with something on that grand a scale, they absolutely need you to participate. But you can stop anytime you want. You don't have to create their world. You don't have to make them all-powerful and wealthy and elite. You don't have to solidify their world brick by brick. As the architect of your own world, you get to choose what you will imagine, what you will build, what you will create in your own image. And that doesn't mean that they, whoever they might be, that they cease to exist or cease to stop trying to hook you into servitude and carrying out whatever evil they might choose. They'll always do that. It also doesn't mean that you refuse to accept the reality of the difficulties in the world around you and instead live in some sort of dream world. No, it doesn't mean that at all. You have to be prudent, of course, in your preparation. But it simply means that you get to decide where the cornerstone of the building, of the temple, will be placed and what will ultimately be built. The first of the 12 aspects of your consciousness is Peter, the rock, and you are your consciousness. You are Peter. Hitherto shall thou come, but no further. He with ears, let him hear.